The question is, can I get this video filmed before Molly knocks over every single book stack? Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to talk you through the 25 books I want to reread in 2025. Quick disclaimer, Molly has currently got the zoomies and I'm trying to film and there is nowhere to shut a door because our new house is all one open plan room downstairs. So I'm going to try and film this as fast as I can before she barrels through and knocks over all of the book stacks that I have here. So yeah, apologies in advance if this video descends into even more chaos than normal. Okay, so in 2024, I successfully completed the 24 books that I wanted to reread in that year. I'll put the video below. So I wanted to continue this into 2025. And hopefully the video that you saw before this was my 2025 intentions. How many times in a video can I say 25? She's now zooming. Apologies if you can hear her. She is so cute though. Yes, I want to continue that. And obviously I've made it part of my intention. So I'll link that video in the description for you. So I'm going to very briefly, is the plan, show you the 25 books that I have chosen off of my shelves. As you can see, I've got gaps everywhere behind me. You should see the hardback shelf. There's barely anything left. And show you what I intend to reread this year. The point of this is to read from my shelves books I already own, books I've already read, and make sure that I do want to keep them. I don't have loads of space. I can't keep every book I read. I don't want to keep every book that I read, and I want to make sure that what is on my finished shelves is actually representative of my book taste and books that I've loved. So that was a really great process in 2024 in weeding out a few books, but also cementing a few in as being like, no, those are forever books and I want to do this again. So there's a whole mix of stuff here. The only rule that I set is that it couldn't be a book that I read in 2024. It had to be older than that. And that was it. That was the only rule really. So let's go through these. I'm not going to give loads of detail, or I'm not planning to, otherwise we'll be here forever. Obviously my GoodReads and my StoryGraph are always linked below, so you can see what I thought of these books the first time round, and you will see me read these as we go through the year. The plan is to reread 2 a month, except in August when I reread 3 as part of my 31 in 31. So the first book that I plan to reread in 2025 is XX by Angela Chadwick. This is actually part of a project with Amy from Amy Myers. She read this in 2023, this beautiful floppy American paperback edition. I've obviously read this because it's a reread challenge, but she passed it on to me, and I believe that she's made some annotations through it. So what I plan to do is read this, annotate it on like see-through sticky tabs, and then I will pass it on to a friend, and it's going to kind of become like a travelling book. So this one is set in a world where it's become possible for 2 females to have a baby without the need of sperm, and it's kind of the ramifications of that. So how far would you go for a child of your own? So that's the first one. Secondly, oh my gosh, she's really on one. I'm not sure. Can you hear her scratching? She's on a scratch post, so it's fine. She's probably doing zoomies. It's way too late in the day. She would normally be asleep, so she's clearly just playing up because she knows I'm trying to film. Right, book number 2 that I want to reread is Chocolat by Joanne Harris. I'm going to try and like trot through these quite quickly. This is historical fiction-ish, bit of magic about food, all that good stuff. I also want to reread The Ophelia Girls by Jane Healey. I was lucky enough. She's really on one. I was lucky enough to be sent an ARC for this from Book Break when it first came out. And I do have this beautiful, I think this is a signed edition from Toppings. And I want to reread this. This is definitely going to be a summary one. I'm also going to reread The 13th Tale by Diane Sitterfield. I've read this book so many times, and I have to be careful when I read it because it will just suck me in and I won't want to move. It's definitely going to be a 5-star. It's definitely a forever book, but I kind of, with some of these books, I'm definitely indulging myself in enjoying a reread, and that is one of them. Speaking of that, another book I'm going to reread this year is The Time Traveller's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. There are definitely some questionable things in this book, coming to it with a 2025 perspective, but it's a book that's always made me sob, so we will see if it can do that again in 2025. I also want to reread Ian McEwan's On Chesil Beach. This is a very beaten up old copy of this book. The spine's like twisted. I haven't read this for years. It's very short, as you can see, and it's about a couple on the first night, their wedding night basically, and it's set in 1962, and it's kind of looking at sexuality and that kind of first experience and awkwardness and all of that sort of stuff. And I remember it being really heartbreaking. but I haven't read it for a long time. So when I was looking at my shelves for this, I was like, oh, I should reread that one. So that's gone onto the list. I'm also going to reread one of my favourite classics, which is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I love this edition. I think, and this is possibly an unpopular opinion, I think Frankenstein gets some of the ugliest covers for some reason. But I really like this quite industrial vibe of this cover. I found this in a charity shop at random. This is one of my favourite classics. I haven't read it for a while. But basically the year 11s had a round of mocks recently, and part of Frankenstein was used in that mock, and marking that, obviously now we've got Noisy Road as well. It just made me want to pick it up again. I haven't read it for ages. It's quite short. Like I said, it's one of my favourite classics. I'm also going to reread Wonderland by Juno Dawson. This is the only one from the London trilogy that I've kept hold of. And it's an Alice in Wonderland retelling, obviously, kind of, but it's more about drug use and all that kind of stuff. And it said what happens when you fall down the rabbit hole. And it does say not suitable for younger readers on the back. And I'm not quite sure. I love Juno Dawson's writing. And like I said, this is part of the London trilogy, along with Clean and Meat Market. And for some reason, this is the only one I've kept. So I want to reread it and see if I do still want to keep it, or if I want to pass it on to the library for our older students, obviously. And then I also want to reread 2 books from one author this year, which is R.F. Kuang. So I want to reread Babel, which I read at the start of 2022, I think, and I absolutely fell in love with it. Wasn't expecting to enjoy it, but really did. Excuse me. And this is dark academia, looking at the kind of morality of what is it? It says an act of translation is always an act of betrayal. So kind of looking at what happens when you translate language. It's looking at colonialism and all of that stuff. I love this cover. So yeah, I really want to reread that one. And I also want to reread Yellowface, obviously by the same author. Very, very, very different vibe. I do have the sprayed edge edition, which I managed to wreck a little bit because I tabbed it. This is contemporary fiction in which a white author steals the manuscript of an Asian author and passes it off as her own, and looking at the ramifications of that. R.F. Kuang's got another book coming out this year, the title of which has completely left me, which I'm very excited to read, but I want to reread these 2 first, or possibly first, but at some point this year I want to reread these 2 books. Next up, where are we on my stack? This stack next. Next up is a book that became a surprise favourite of 2023, and that is You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Kweki Emeze. I loved this. I've been working my way through the author's backlist. I think I've only got one left to read, which is up on my TBR. I found this beautiful hardback edition, look at that spine, in a charity shop with my brother in 2023, must have been. Didn't really have very high expectations, and then it absolutely blew me away. This is about a young widow kind of navigating life after the death of her husband, and then she falls in love, or she kind of has this inappropriate relationship with somebody, and yeah, I don't want to say too much about it, but yeah, I loved it first time, and I feel like this is going to be a keeper, but I just want to make sure it is. So that is on the reread stack. Then I'm going to reread Blue Ticket by Sophie McIntosh. She also wrote The Water Cure, which she writes this kind of, I have to be in the right mood for a Sophie McIntosh book. They are very weird and slow and quiet, and you have to kind of work to get the meaning, but I really enjoy it. It's like, if I'm in the right mood, it's like the right level of weird for me. And this one is dystopian because it's in a world where on the day of your first bleed, you report to the station to learn what kind of woman you will be. A white ticket grants you children. A blue ticket grants you freedom. You are relieved of the terrible burden of choice. And once you've taken your ticket, there's no going back. And this is looking at a girl who possibly gets the wrong ticket, and what she's going to do. So yeah, I loved it the first time. Obviously, I loved all of these. I gave them either 4 or 5 stars for them to be on my shelf. But yeah, definitely want to reread that one. I also want to reread Other Women by Emma Flint. This was one of my favourite reads of 2023. I read her debut novel in 2024, didn't love it, but this one, again, I was lucky enough to get an ARC from Book Break and then treated myself to this hardback copy because I loved it so much. You've got 2 parallel storylines, and between obviously 2 women, and you kind of work out how they're connected. And yeah, I absolutely loved this. This was very, very quiet until the end, and then you suddenly realise what was going on, and it blew me away. So yeah, I'm very excited to reread that one. I've also decided to treat myself to a reread of Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. This is the book, again, I got an ARC from Book Break, that kind of kicked off my love of cozy fantasy. and I don't know if we're going to get another book from him this year. I hope we are. I read Bookshops and Bone Dust, which was the prequel to this, but was released second last year, and loved it. I just want to be back with Viv in her coffee shop as she builds it with her found family, and a tiny bit of conflict and just cozy vibes. So yeah, I'm going to treat myself at some point this year to a reread of Legends and Lattes. On a very different excuse me, tone, but another one where we've got an art from Book Break, is A Girlhood, A Letter to My Transgender Daughter by Carolyn Hayes. Carolyn Hayes is a pseudonym. We don't know who has actually written this book. This is non-fiction, and it's about a mother writing a letter to her trans daughter, telling her daughter about the events from the mother's perspective of the day that somebody knocked on the door. They got a knock on the door and it was CPS, Child Protective Services, and someone had reported the family because they were supporting their daughter in her transition. And this was so powerful the first time I read it. I feel like it will still be really powerful, but again, I really want to reread it and see what I think. And I didn't have much non-fiction in this stack, so I've added that one in. I also want to reread a book that was huge, I think like 2020, 2021, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This remains the only V.E. Schwab book I've read because I loved it so much. I'm too scared to read anything else. I always see mixed reviews of this, and I know there are some issues with the plot, but I feel like I want to read it again and see if it's still one that I can really enjoy. So if you can hear Molly in the background. Right, last stack. So, in 2025, I want to start a reread of a series. This may cause me to reread the whole series. That's fine if it does, but I'm definitely putting the first two on this list. And that is Catherine of Aragon, The True Queen, and Anne Boleyn, A King's Obsession, obviously both by Alison Weir. This is part of the 6 Tudor Queens series. You can also see how badly the spines have faded on my shelf. That makes me sad. But yeah, I want to reread these two, which like I said may well cause me to reread the whole lot. I read the whole series of these in 2020. I think I might have finished it in 2021 when the last ones came out in paperback. I love Alison Weir's writing. I've read a lot from her, both fiction and non-fiction, and I'm excited to get back into that series. I also want to continue a reread that I started in 2024, and that is Sovereign and Revelation by CJ Sampson. This is the Matthew Shardlake series. I read, you might have just seen Molly walk behind me, don't know or not. She's so small, I'm not even sure if she showed up. I read the first 2 as part of the reread challenge in 2024, and I want to carry this on. This is historical fiction set in Tudor times, and we follow Matthew Shardlake, who is a solicitor, as he solves various crimes and things. Then I want to read what I always say is my favourite classic, but I've not read it for a while, and that is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. I love this edition. You guys always ask about this edition. So this is, what edition are you? This is the Alma Classics edition. Beautiful. This is creepy. This is a creepy ghost story with creepy children. I always enjoy it. Let's see if I enjoy it on reread. Haven't read it for a little while. Then I'm going to start a reread. I'm going to read this book, and this might also, sorry, that's Molly again. She's chaos today. Start a reread, which might make me want to reread the whole trilogy, because this is the first in a series of 3 books, obviously. That's what a trilogy is. But I haven't read it for ages and take up quite a lot of space on my shelves. And this is The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss. I picked up this first one because Leanne from Literary Diversions was like, you have to read this book or we can't be friends. So I was like, okay, I'll read the book. And then I loved it. And yeah, finished out the trilogy. And this one, sorry, is kind of a classic retelling, because we follow Mary Jekyll, daughter of Dr. Jekyll. Apologies if you can hear my cat being an idiot. Following the death of her father, Dr. Jekyll, and she basically sets out to find Hyde, because Hyde's got a massive, she'll get a load of money if she catches him. She's destitute, her mother's died, she's struggling for money, and looking for Hyde, she comes across, what is her name? Diana, his daughter, and it goes from there. And they basically end up as this motley crew, this collection of daughters from classic fiction, and then they solve crime and go on adventures. And I loved it the first time. Like I said, it takes up quite a lot of space on my shelf. Like, this is one of those weird, really tall American paperbacks, so it takes up a lot of space, and the second book is huge. So I want to reread. Hopefully I will enjoy it, but also just to check I do want to keep them. Right, last few. this is the second non-fiction. There's not loads of non-fiction on the stack this year, but I want to reread Roaring Girls by Holly Kite. Last time I read this was when I went to Edinburgh to see Leanne and Harry and Jean, which was 2022, 2021, can't remember. I'll find the vlog and link it below. Oh my gosh, I don't think you saw her then. She's literally doing laps. I've never seen her do zoomies this hard. They have been inside for almost 6 weeks. They're allowed outside at the end of this week, so I think she's finally lost her marbles. Anyway, Roaring Girls, as it says at the top, is the extraordinary lives of history's unsung heroines even. And it's a vivacious account of 8 remarkable, invisible women whose stories were crying out to be heard. And I remember loving this the first time, but I just want to reread this. And again, it's quite big, it's quite bulky, so I want to see if I want to keep it on my shelves. Last two. This is a book that I loved, so this is why I've got a signed first edition, and that is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. This book was huge in 2021, 2022. Check content warnings. This cover does not tell you the level of trauma involved in this book, so please check content warnings. But I want to go back and reread this and be back with Elizabeth Zott, who is a scientist in the 60s. Because she's a woman, the only way that she can kind of be public with her science work is to have a cooking show, but she decides that instead of just teaching women to cook, she's going to teach it as chemistry. I loved this, obviously a first time round, and I haven't reread it, so it's due for a reread. And then finally one, again, I know I'm going to love this. This is me indulging myself with a reread of one of my favourite books, and that is The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. This is on the list of books. I think I did a video of if I could only keep 10.5 books, which I'll link if you're interested. This is on that list. I adore it. We're in wartime Ireland, Dublin. It all happens on one night. It makes me sob every time, and I'm excited to see how I feel about it this time around because I haven't reread it in a while. Okay, that was 25 books in 16 minutes plus the waffle at the start, so I don't think that was too bad. Do you reread books? Tell me in the comments. Do you reread books? If you do you do it at random? Do you set yourself a TBR like I am? Are there any books that you want to reread in 2025? If you got to this point in the video, let's have the cat emoji because Molly is doing her best to wreck this video and turn it into chaos. So leave me the cat emoji if you got to this point in the video. Please subscribe if you like more of this chaos, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks everyone. Bye.